Yo, what up YouTube? ExplosiveMovement here, back again with yet another video. In this video today, I'm going to be talking about plyometrics and the weaknesses of plyometrics and some misconceptions that people may have about them. Alright, so as I've talked about before, plyometrics are basically any exercise where you're taking advantage of the stretch shortening cycle within the body, where there is a rapid loading and unloading of your own body. You think about exercises like tuck jumps or depth jumps. You know, you're jumping up, dropping down onto the ground, jumping up very quickly. You know, it's all about absorbing and producing force extremely quickly. Now, this is a great exercise for improving reactive ability and movement efficiency as you are teaching your body to absorb a force and then produce that force very quickly, which is going to help make you a better overall athlete. However, plyometric exercises, what they're working is really only confined to the lower leg area, basically the Achilles tendon area, with maybe a little bit of quadricep activation involved. I mean, you think about plyometric exercises and they are pretty much performed with pretty much a straight leg. You know, there's very little knee bend. You know, there's a slight knee bend, which is, you know, the quadricep activation, but it's pretty much only isolated to the lower leg region. So you think about your feet, your Achilles tendon complex, which is fine because you want to make sure that those areas are strong to make yourself the best athlete possible. But because of this, plyometrics really neglect one of the most important areas for athletic development, which is the posterior chain and specifically the hip region. Because there really isn't a lot of hip hinge in any type of plyometric activity, when you do these exercises, you're not working that area at all. And this can be very detrimental if you pretty much only focus on plyometrics, because the hip area, you know, you're generating most of your power in your hip area for athletic movements. There's a great sprint coach named Charlie Francis who he talked about how for his sprinters, when they were sprinting, most of their power came from the hip area, and in terms of the ankle region, there was a lot less power generated in the ankle region compared to the hip region. But in plyometrics, you're mainly working on the ankle region. Now, I'm not saying that plyometrics are a bad exercise, because they are good for, like I said, improving lower leg strength and improving that movement efficiency, but they neglect the hip area, so you need to make sure you're doing other exercises that will work on that hip area. Obviously, you know, making sure you're doing good squats and good deadlifts is going to help out your hip area, but in terms of explosive bodyweight movements, doing things like box jumps or other pause jump variations, doing kneeling jumps, doing broad jumps, as well as other bounding variations. These are all great examples of exercises that work on your hip explosiveness, right? Then there's also medicine ball throws, and there's also sprinting. And I want to talk about sprinting for a second, because sprinting is the one exercise that really combines everything that I've talked about into one. It has the reactive ability in the lower leg region because you're bouncing them off the ground very quickly. You're working on your explosive power throughout your whole body because you're driving out very forcefully. And as I've talked about earlier, majority of your power is generated at the hip in sprinting, so you're also working on your hip area, right? So that's why I love sprinting, and I think if you're an athlete, you should be doing sprints at least some point in your training, because it really ties in everything together when it comes to improving athleticism. But yeah, overall, so what I want people to take away from this video is that plyometrics are not the end-all, be-all when it comes to athleticism training, because it's pretty much isolated to the lower leg region and neglects the hip region. So make sure, if you want to become the best athlete, do your plyos if you want to work on that movement efficiency, but don't forget to do those exercises that will help out with your explosive power in the hip area. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. ExplosiveMovement signing off. Peace.